So what is autofiction? Is it a new genre? Is it a genre at all? Or is it something you want to consider when writing your memoir? We're going to look at those questions in this video. Hello, I'm Brenda, this is Write Your Story, and I'm here to help you to write your memoir. So what is autofiction? Is it a new genre? And what makes it so controversial? The Collins Dictionary has this definition: a genre of fiction that is heavily influenced by the life experience of the author. An article in the Sunday Times in 2018 referred to a piece of writing this way: it's autofiction, memoir in novel's clothing. So even in those two comments, you can pick up the division and the controversy in autofiction. Autofiction made its reappearance in 1977 in modern literature when Serge Dubrovsky, in his French novel called Fils, referred to it as autofiction. He said that it was an autobiographical novel. This was a diversion from novel, which is fiction, and he claimed and owned that certain aspects of his novel were autobiographical. He had brought his own life into the novel. And so that now relaunched autofiction. Those novels were still categorized as fiction and promoted as fictional stories, even though it had strong autobiographical elements that the author owned, even putting their own name in as a main character. Let's now compare that with memoir. We know that memoir is your true story. It is a non-fiction piece. Everything in it is true, or is as close to true as possible. We don't always remember exactly everything that happened, and sometimes we have to draw on our faulty recollection in order to put the story together. But we know that this is as true an account as we can muster about our life. We also know that some names, dates may be changed in order to protect privacy, in order to protect other people in our story. That may even extend a little bit to a small event or two. Now, even that can be controversial. Some people will say, oh no, the minute you do that, it's autofiction. Well, I disagree. I think memoir has a small component in it that we know is probably not 100% true, but it's true enough to hold the story and maintain the story and its integrity. Even two people witnessing the same event have different accounts of how that happened. And we know that in memoir, and we accept it. But we see memoir as true. It is a true story. And if some things have been changed, there is a disclaimer. And usually it is always to protect privacy. And we all accept that. However, now with memoir, as more people write their stories, they're meeting this dilemma of what do I do about certain aspects of my story that I want to tell but may cause problems. It may cause problems for others, it may cause problems for me. And now autofiction starts to become really tempting to write. Perhaps you have a story you want to tell and it involves where you worked, and this would actually be contravening confidential parameters, but you want to tell your story. So what do you do in that instance? That could now become a tempting way to write autofiction, where you can take your story, perhaps dismantle it, break it up, turn it inside out, change so much about it that it's actually not recognizable from the main story, but there are many elements in it that are true that you've repositioned, changed the chronology, upended so much about the story that you've even moved it out of perhaps the country or the city or the town where it happened and put it somewhere else. For some people, they may say, well, that event never happened, but it pretty much could have happened, and I want to write it and put it in my story. Now we start bringing fiction into memoir. Another element why some people have actually used autofiction is to protect themselves. They want to tell their stories, but they know they're going to get backlash. And perhaps it's backlash for who they are as people, perhaps it's backlash for who they are in their stories. Women have experienced this in the past when memoir was known as misery literature written by women, which is not true, but it was very much positioned that way. And women who wrote very openly about their stories would be maligned in the press, would be maligned in ways that men were not. And so for some women, it became a way to tell their story, to use autofiction to tell their story, and then to say it's so blended with fictional elements that people don't really know what's true and what's not true. And so it now might protect the writer from being maligned. So there are a number of reasons why you might want to use autofiction. But essentially, most memoir writers want to use autofiction for the two things that it gives writers. It gives the writers liberty, and it gives the writer ambiguity. You have the liberty to do what you like, to take liberties with your manuscript, with your story, with the integrity of it, with the chronology of it, and to change things up, to bring novel and fiction into your writing, to make things up if you wish, to reconstruct it, to deconstruct it, to change it around that it may not even look much like the true story. Yet you're still the character. A lot of this is still true and happened, but not perhaps the way you're presenting it. That's the liberty of autofiction. The ambiguity of autofiction is just that. Nobody really knows what's true and what's not. And that's the gift of autofiction. And that is also the controversy of autofiction. So is autofiction a genre? The Collins definition of autofiction says that it is. Others say that it is not a genre, has never been a genre, and they certainly hope it never will be a genre either. However, I think the problem really is classification. It comes down to the issue of where does it go on the shelf. Up till now, it's gone on the shelf under fiction because it's primarily been novelists writing novels who have brought in autobiographical elements into their story, and so it's still been regarded as fiction. Now, however, with the surge in memoir writing and the surge in people telling their own stories, no longer the domain of the rich and famous and the celebrities, the shift has moved from novelists using autobiographical elements to memoirists using fictional elements. As I'm working through this, I'm actually coming to understand autofiction for myself. So by no means am I saying I have an authoritative voice on autofiction. I personally do not want to see autofiction in amongst memoir. I think the memoir genre has fought long and hard enough for its own authenticity, for its own integrity. No longer is it the misery literature of women. It is an honorable genre for all people to tell their stories. When we write memoir, we are owning our stories. That is the gift and the power of memoir. We come to our stories and we now own them and we tell them. And there's integrity in there, there's healing there, there's a lot of hard work that comes into writing your memoir and being honest about it and putting it on the page. I think autofiction will have its place for certain people who need to actually have that distance, have that camouflage, have that deconstruction of their story. But I don't believe that that is the right starting point for most people. I think for most people, we want to write memoir. And we want to write it honestly and with integrity and keeping to the truth of our story. But there is that element where autofiction has its place. And autofiction then essentially is based on a true story. And it needs to be classified as that, based on a true story. What I think we're ending up with now are 4 categories. 2 under nonfiction and 2 under fiction. If you write a novel and you bring in some of your own personal story, it's an autobiographical novel and needs to be identified as such. If your starting point is memoir, a true story, but you're now going to bring in the liberties and the ambiguity of autofiction, for whatever reason, it's now autofiction. So in summary, I think we can even say memoir, a true story. Autofiction, based on a true story. Autobiographical novel, inspired by a true story. Novel, a story. Which one is the right one for you? It's a personal choice. Do let me know which one you're writing. I'd love to hear about it.